I couldn't speak. "It's not so bad," he said. "You don't have to be a beast like him. He made me, and I'm not awful, am I?" I moved as far away from him as I could on that tiny bed. He reached for me anxiously. "You don't have to prey on humans, animals, Sufis. You eat animals anyway." I tried to shake fear free of him, but he held tighter. It's your only chance," he insisted. He stroked my clammy brow and smiled. "I could change you anyway, against your will, but I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to force you. I want to save your life." He repeatedly stroked my brow, lulling me, and I relaxed and foolishly took comfort in it. "I want to save your life," he repeated. "He'll kill you." And so, I was so frightened, so weak, and so afraid of dying. I ignored the screaming inside me and believed his lies. "Heaven help me," I said. "Yes." Simon felt the warm hand on his and realized he had not been seeing this room at all. His eyes focused on So, and he felt ashamed at the compassion on her face. It was a second before he could speak again. He opened my shirt. I didn't know what to expect. Quickly he sliced my chest with a claw-like nail. I whispered, then I saw his fangs and gave up hope. He was torturing me. He was like the other. But he swiftly snicked his own wrist and held it to my chest. Our blood mingled, there as I stared down in belief. "To make sure," he said, and held out his wrist to me. I looked at him uncomprehendingly. "Suck," he said, and I jerked my head away. But he grasped my hair with a grip beyond the strength of a child, and forced my head around. "For your life," he hissed, and choking back the vial, I drank his blood, while he lapped mine up directly above my heart. I sucked till he pulled his wrist away. That is the way our kind are born, Zoe. It takes the sharing of blood. Our victims, when they're drained, well, they're just dead. They don't rise again. Not unless, in their final weakness, they share the blood of one of the damned." While I watched in horror, the boy held his arm out for me to see as the blood dried and flaked off. The skin curled back together with a will of its own. The cut on his wrist sealed, and the scar faded away into nothing. "No one can hurt you now," he said. "And it's true, Zoe. No matter what has happened to me, the only scar I have is the one he gave me." "Show me," Zoe said, challenging him. Simon smiled lightly. He slipped the jacket off and a creaking of lever and pulled the t-shirt over his head, tousling his hair. Zoe ran a burning finger along the scar, from above his left nipple and a streak to his right ribs. He closed his eyes. Her touch seared his marble cold flesh deliciously, and his nipples hardened. He was aware of the cold even more because of her. He pulled her to him. "Take away my cold," he thought. "Make me warm again." She trembled, and he thought perhaps it was not from fear, but because she had never been held to a man's naked chest before. Yet she wrapped her arms around him. How long, he thought, since a beautiful girl trembled for me alone, and not because of my power to hypnotize. He continued his story, holding her tight against the cold. "I crashed into a dark and dreamless sleep, the sort of sleep where a person loses contact with his very existence. I think that was when I died. When I woke up again, I had changed. I felt as if a cold sun were glowing within me and growing larger. With it came power. All through that day, anger built in, rising. Finally, I lay there rigid, staring at the ceiling, awaiting my tormentor, not knowing yet what I would do, and terrified by my rage. The door finally squeaked open, and I feigned sleep, not knowing what else to do. The man came to me where I lay, and I heard his breath rasping greedily as he bent to me. His weight on the bed rolled me against him. When he put his loped face to my neck, I was mindlessly ready to strangle him, but his fangs sank into my vein, paralyzing me for that moment. But then he wrenched back. He spat, he snarled. He pushed himself off the bed with a force that shattered the frame and threw me against the wall. "Boy," he screamed, whirling to face the door. "Boy, what have you done?" I pulled myself across the broken bed toward him, as the boy came hurtling through the door with a look of glee on his face. "Despicable puppy," my captor said. "You dare defy me." He lurched for the boy, and the beast broke through in me. Simon saw that the other room again and felt the surge of hate. I looked around madly for a weapon and snatched what was at hand. Stumbling from the bed, I flung myself at him. I ran him through with a shard from the ruined bedpost. Simon felt Zoe shudder as she made a sound of disgust. He fell to the floor, jerking and twitching. His dark wig slid from his head, revealing frosty hair. His skin fell in. He shrank, he wreathed. Finally he lay still, a shriveled monkey of a thing, scarcely human. The boy kicked the corpse and grinned. "How clever," he said. "Much better than what I had in mind." I was shaking so badly I could hardly spare much amazement for his words. Simon paused, aware of how tightly Zoe held him. "I am rich now," the boy said. "The fool willed me all his goods, never expecting me to inherit, of course. The servants will get rid of this. I have hardly promised them much for their loyalty. We will have a fine time together, Simon." This was the first time he had used my name. I did not remember telling it. "Why together?" I asked. "Why me?" And he answered, "When you look like a child, you need a protector, someone who stands as a guardian in others' eyes, who's better than one's own brother. Zoe released Simon and sat back. "Christopher," she said. He nodded. "I thought so." Yet she looked shocked. Yes, it all fell into place. Who the man was, who this child, if I could profane the word, was. Simon turned from Zoe. He would hate even more telling the next part. He placed his hands lightly on the coffee table and continued, head bowed, feeling the ice rise again within him. "You will get stronger," Christopher told me, "but the color will fade from you as your blood changes. Your heart will cease to beat, yet nevertheless your blood will crawl through your veins. You will take in air out of habit only. You will need it to speak, but not to live. And you will shun the day and its burning rays, because the daylight is for the living, and the sun rejects it. You will live by night, but what power you will have? The power to suck the very essence of life itself and bend others to your will. You will live a long, long time enough to accumulate wealth and to afford many pleasures. We will be good together, Simon. You won't be like Mother." "What do you mean?" I demanded, dreading the answer. And Christopher told me. Wolfram wanted me to kill her to prove I was loyal to him. I didn't like it much and offered her a chance, but she turned from me. She didn't love me any more. "Mother?" I said softly, at first in shock. "You killed Mother?" I asked louder. "Then Mother?" I screamed. Zoe shrieked and jerked back. The table had cracked. The glass was rimmed with frost. Simon shook. I hurled myself at him, but I was slammed to the ground. I didn't expect it from one his size. He grinned at me and gloated. "As I said, you will grow stronger, but not now. I'm the strong one now." He turned. "Oh, what do you desire for your first meal?" he asked, casually over his shoulder as he left. "Shall I bring home your favorite girl from that tavern of yours?" I pulled myself from the floor. "You said animals." "I lied," he said, through the crack of the door. It closed, and I heard him slide a bolt home outside. It was then I realized what I had done. I stumbled frantically around that room, looking for another way out, but there was no other door. I wrenched down drapery, meaning to flee through a window, but found none, just blank wall. I pummeled the locked door with useless fists, and battered my shoulder against it. To no avail. I even tried to dig through the wall with a spoon, but the room had to be underground, with rock behind the plaster, for all the impression I made. I gave up, exhausted, and flung myself back on the shattered bed. I was trapped and damned, with only a hideous corpse for company. Maybe that was when I started to go mad. Simon suddenly noticed the table and removed his hands. There were no cuts. He brought me a girl that night, a cringing young thing. I refused to go near her. "You will," he laughed, and dragged her away. Yet night after night I refused, and he grew angrier each time. But I was growing weaker, and every time he brought me that offering it was harder to resist. Finally he brought her in bound and slashed her throat with a kitchen knife so the blood would run freely. He took his fill in front of me until his ploy worked and the smell of fresh blood drove me wild. I made a mess of it while Christopher laughed and laughed as if it were a great joke. But the joke was on him, for he'd given me the power to overcome him. To his surprise I knocked him aside and ran from the room, from that deserted house, out into the streets.